This was kind of a last minute thing. Bettina said that Joanne was supposed to talk today and had called and said she couldn't. But Bettina said, you have my permission to talk about anything you want. I was pretty excited. Then she sent me this email with the list of topics for the month, which was nurturing self, nurturing the growth process, nurturing expansion. And I thought, it must be okay to talk about anything I want as long as it's nurturing. I noticed that in the phrase nurturing self, the S was capitalized. And my first thought was that self, with the capital S, didn't need nurturing. I mean, it's pure spirit. My second thought was, although the higher self is intact, inviolable, my ideas and concepts regarding higher self can always use a picker-upper. So mixed with another thought was that nurturing the self with a capital S and the nurturing the self with a small s are in completely different realms in my body. But are they? I should say in my being, not just my body. I'd like to share an experience that I had recently that added a little insight. I do a lot of pendulum work. I use my pendulum like an extension of my arm. It's used very much like muscle testing, if you're familiar with that, where you put an object in one hand and then someone presses down on your other arm to see if you test weak or strong for that object. Well, my pendulum works similar to that as an extension of me. This week I was using my pendulum to do some testing for food allergies. So first I printed out this long list of foods, and then I cut the list all up so that each name was separate. I folded each little piece so that I couldn't see the writing, and then I drew them out of a bag one by one, laid them down, and held my pendulum over them. And the pendulum, for me, does a clockwise spin if it's positive and a counterclockwise spin if it's negative. And so this is my way of knowing whether this was a good food or a bad food for me. I always begin any work like this with affirming the indwelling presence as my higher self. And I ask it to give my pendulum hand the truth in testing. The experience that I had this week was an unusual one, but very informative. While watching my pendulum hand, at one point I could physically see the presence as an overshadow of my physical hand. It was working through and as me, yet it appeared larger than the physical self, larger than the individual life. It was like having an aura of fine, misty white completely surrounding my hand. After the first few questions, I had asked the presence to take over the testing completely. And then when I addressed questions to the pendulum hand during that time, the pendulum didn't move. And I mean, absolutely no motion whatsoever. And the information I received from that experience was that as pure presence, there are no harmful or harmless foods. All is one. I realized that to get an accurate reading, that is, for the physical jhana, I had to step back a little bit from that total oneness of spirit and recognize the physical body. At this point, I asked Higher Self if it would answer questions for the jhana body while still remaining under the umbrella of at-one-ment. Excuse me. Oneness, of course, is something we never escape, You know, even if we should be so mentally deranged as to desire escape from one, we couldn't. It's just a given. So after that, I was able to proceed more normally and learned from the results of the testing that my thoughts about food have influenced my eating. Well, sure, of course. But the point higher self was making, in a subtle way, was that what I read, what I see on TV, what I hear from others, is their perception of the world, which includes food, of course, and doesn't necessarily fit my world. As such, I can accept or reject. My mind can choose, and I can change my mind anytime I don't like the original outcome. I suspect that in the long run, there is no food more harmful than any other food, except thinking makes it so. As an even greater awareness came to me during the meditation after the pendulum reading, that it is necessary to eliminate all old beliefs and thoughts and ideals that no longer serve me. I would need to do this, I was told, before I could fully view, touch, hold on to the truth. This truth is that infinite intelligence, infinite wisdom, power, love are mine by right of who I am. For some time now, I've delved so deeply into the spiritual realm that I'd lost track of the value of being physical. I've done this before in my lifetime. It's like being outside of the body, looking on. I was reminded in meditation that although spiritual by nature, I've also accepted to live in the physical world as a way of expressing, communicating, learning, and sharing. I was also reminded that it was time for me to return to my body and take on my physical responsibilities. I was told that it was one thing to accept, embrace wholly that I am a spirit being, but I cannot and should not ignore my responsibility as a physical being. Once again, I'm receiving the message that inspiration and guidance come from a higher source, but must still be instrumented through and with the jhana body. With that in mind, I'm in the process of nurturing the self within the self. Thank you.